passage of time guarantees the existence of this table with the mass. Guarantees it. Because everything will happen with the passage of time, including tables with masses, including this interview. But in which sense is it real? It's real only in the sense that when you look at the field of potential from a specific angle, there is a table with mass. Another creature who would have a different software and would look at it from a different kind of angle would not necessarily see a table with mass. He may interpret the potential of time differently. But the only thing that underlies everything is not space, and not mass, not motion. They're all derivative concepts. It's time. It's the only thing. Now, there were philosophers who said there's another thing that is for sure, and that is I. If I don't exist, who is saying this thing? So this is like for sure. But we'll not go into it. But in physics, we don't have I, except in quantum mechanics to some extent. But so in physics, we are forced to talk about non-psychological or non-philosophical components. And there in physics, only thing that is immutable, only thing that gives rise to all other things is time. Only thing. And so I started from time, and what I did, I showed that if I look at time in a certain way, I get general relativity. If I look at time in another way, I get quantum mechanics, all of it. If I look at the third way, I get all elementary particles. If I look at the fourth way, which is a work being done now, they're getting all the constants of nature.
Right.
Just by looking. Now, how to look at time, of course, that's mathematics. We can go into it right now, but this is the core.
Yeah.
It's exceedingly difficult to understand.
Yeah.
Because it's so counterintuitive. Einstein was not counterintuitive. Einstein was talking about trains and elevators. I mean, it's totally understandable.
No, you've got to sort of break the normal paradigms, and as you say, probably create new language to explain what this is.
It's beyond language. That's the problem. I'm using mathematics, heavy mathematics, extremely complex, because mathematics is the closest that comes to non-being. It's the language that best describes non-being. All other languages are focused on being. So if I talk to you in English describes existing things, being. Glass, table, life coach.
You can't describe that which not is.
Yes.
It doesn't.
Only mathematics can do that.
Right.
Mathematics can describe that which is not. That which is not. So I'm forced to use mathematics. So I somehow have to communicate, or I don't communicate, like Zen Buddhism. But if I wish to communicate, I'm forced to use some language that can somehow help me to transcend being. And that's mathematics. Now I sound like a crazed Indian guru, but I'm not. I'm very far from it. I'm a very down-to-earth guy and very,
So another thing that most people wouldn't know about you is that you've been economic advisor to the Macedonian government and to other governments beside, is that right?
Yeah, true.
How many governments have you been an economic advisor to?
Total 7, I think, or 6 or 7.
An economic advisor to 6 or 7 governments, but you don't have a qualification in economics?
No, I don't have any degree in economics.
This is an unusual set of circumstances.
Unusual trajectory, yes.
Yeah.
Not for politicians. Politicians do become advisors, even economic advisors.
Right.
For example, when I was economic advisor to one of the governments of Macedonia, because I've been to 3, one of the governments, my counterpart was the former Prime Minister of Yugoslavia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ante Markovic.
Wow.
So we were working together. And he was a politician.
Yeah.
So politicians do become sometimes economic advisors, but for private citizen like myself, it's pretty unheard of. True.
Where did it start? Which was the first country?
First of all, I've authored well over 200 papers in economics.
Right.
Which, if you go to Google Scholar, and make an appropriate search, you will find some of them. So I have a kind of a record of papers and analysis and so on. Second thing, I went through the gamut of business. I started off at the age of 19 or 20 when I joined Nissim Geon. Nissim Geon was or still is, a Jewish multi-billionaire. So I went through various positions in his organization. I became an independent businessman and his partner. Then I became the first venture capitalist in Israel. Then I owned 80% of the Israeli internet market. Then I bought the database system of the Israeli government in a privatization deal. So I was involved in privatization, and I had a temporary work agency, temporary job agency. So what I'm trying to say is that I've done it all. I've done everything. I've been a businessman in every conceivable field: leasing, temporary work. I mean, you name it, I've been there. So, business experience in finance. I used to own a bank, so I was a banker.
You owned a bank?
I used to own co-owned a bank.
I'm not even surprised at this point.
The bank was surprised. So I've literally done it all. So this business experience, I think, attracted governments to hire me as a consultant.
Okay.
Because there was this craze in the 80s and the 90s about privatization, venture capital, startups, new businesses, encouraging the private sector. Many of these countries didn't have a private sector at all to start with.
Okay.
So they needed to develop a private sector. So in essence, though technically I was classified as economic advisor to governments, I was actually more like a business advisor to governments, or entrepreneurship advisor, or very frequently finance advisor. So I really have an extensive background in finance. I worked in Wall Street, in London. I used to live in London, in New York. So this is what I brought to the table. And of course, I started off in my very, very early youth, aiding and abetting corrupt dictators in hiding their wealth, breaking international sanctions, creating offshore and outsource.
In your early youth, how old were you when you?
20.
20, when you started helping corrupt dictators.
Corrupt dictators and their governments to.
Can you name any of the?
Yeah, I mean, it's not classified anymore. I was advisor to the Minister of Interior of Nigeria. Then I was advisor to the head of the computer department in Lagos University, who was laundering money for several ministers via fictitious computer purchases.
So you're working for African dictatorships?
Africans mostly, yes.
Yeah.
They're the most corrupt, so it was the most profitable niche. And then I discovered the Balkans, which, puts Africa in the shade. So,
and you've stayed in the Balkans for quite a while now, haven't you?
Well, it's Balkans, Central, and gradually, as I grew older and wiser, or some people say stupider, I acquired respectability.
Right.
So I stopped, being involved in such things,
Yeah.
and I started really advising governments. So I was
Right.
advisor to the Yugoslav government on matters of inflation and breaking the embargo, which became totally inhuman due to corruption in the United Nations. I advised the Macedonian government on absolutely everything. I mean, macroeconomic policy, issuing bonds for foreign exchange, a million things. My student, at the time, I had a student. He became prime minister later, Nikola Gruevski. We wrote a book together. I was advisor to other governments, like Czech Republic. I was advisor in Middle East. I was advisor to businesses. So I have a pretty impressive portfolio actually as an economic and financial advisor.
And it must have been successful with each government because presumably they would be
there was word of
you
mouth. There was word of mouth. I
Right.
mean, this guy is a narcissist, but still, you can steal horses with him. And if not horses, then billions. I mean, no, I'm kidding. There was a phase where I was dealing with corrupt dictators.
So it was criminal activity that you were engaged in?
Well, I didn't commit crimes, they did. I was happy to help.
Yeah.
And there was a phase where I was this distinguished economic advisor working hand in hand or hand in glove with the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, EBRD, Economic Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and so on. So that was my respectable phase.
Yeah.
Respectable phase started more or less 20-something years ago,
Okay.
after my work with the Yugoslav government. In Yugoslavia, I helped to quell the inflation. At the time, there was a Jewish governor of a central bank. His name was Abramovich. And together we destroyed, there was an enormous inflation. I remember that women were standing in the windows of shoe shops. You buy shoes. I saw a woman standing in the window, and I asked the owner of the shop, what's she doing there? He said her job is to change the prices, because prices were changing like every minute.
Wow.
Inflation was gigantic.
Wow.
It was like 10,000. It reached the maximum, I think, 10,000% in some days. It's absolutely enormous. And Abramovich and I implemented a program that stopped the inflation dead in its tracks overnight, literally. Lydia, my wife, remembers it. She watched it on television. She remembers me giving a press conference.
So she saw you on TV
As a kid.
before. Yeah.
She was a kid.
Right.
And the Prime Minister of Macedonia, ex-Prime Minister, Nikola Gruevski, also saw me as a kid.
Right.
So they were kids when I remember the dinosaurs. So they were kids. So I worked with Abramovich, and then I did something I'm very proud of. Although technically that would have been absolute international crime, and I should have been prosecuted and put behind bars together with other charitable characters. I helped to break the embargo on Yugoslavia. I didn't break it; I demolished it. Nothing was left of it. And I told you yesterday I did it because of a personal reason, but that is something I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of because Yugoslavia, later Serbia, was punished, and to some extent the punishment was just. They did commit atrocities and suppress civilian population and so on. But the implementation of the embargo was utterly corrupt. The United Nations is the most corrupt body which puts to shame Sierra Leone and, I mean,
I think it seems
absolute nest of incompetent, corrupt, third-grade civil, uncivil servants.
That's the one thing I've heard Bosnian Serbs and Croats agree on unanimously.
Horrible,
was the UN
horrible institution.
waste of time. Yeah.
Not question of waste of time. It's utterly corrupt, utterly. And so they took the embargo, and all UN officials, on all levels, down to the list of the Romanian and nondescript African soldiers who were implementing the embargo, blocking rivers and separating Macedonia from Serbia and so on. And all of them demanded bribes. All of them. Big bribes, small bribes. I mean, you had to bribe everyone, including the representative of the United Nations there and so on.
Yeah.
And so it reached a situation that they said, if you don't bribe us, we're not going to let in medicines and food and heating oil, so that there will be no heat.
And this is, for people who don't know the area, it gets very, very cold.
Very cold. That first year, 20-something old people died in Belgrade. And then there were shortages in hospitals. There was no electricity, no medicines, no nothing. Women were dying in childbirth, and all because of corruption. At the beginning, they sent numerous delegations to me in Tel Aviv, asking me to help with the sanctions. I'm an expert on offshore hiding special purpose entities. I mean, that's my playpen. And I refused. I turned them down because I said, I think you're misbehaving. I think what you're doing in the region is utterly despicable. But when I visited, my friend invited me. When I visited and saw what's happening, and when Serbia, at the time it was Yugoslavia, and when I had this personal tragedy happen to my friend, I then decided to help with the embargo. And within less than 6 months, nothing, not a stone was left of the embargo. I transferred $4.5 billion outside Yugoslavia. There was money for everything. Everything was flowing in with the good services of Macedonians. The Macedonians were the most supportive, the most helpful. Macedonian companies, Macedonian businessmen. They got rich, of course, but they were very, very helpful through Greece. And so this is something I'm proud of. Technically, crime. Technically, an international crime. Yeah. I'm very proud of it. I'm less proud of my role in Sierra Leone. In Sierra Leone, I got involved with a guy called Chaptai Kamanovich, who was later assassinated in Russia, and with a bullet hail to his Mercedes. I feel sorry for the Mercedes. It was a very nice car, and I collaborated with him in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone at the time there was a dictator. His name was General Momo. And General Momo had two proclivities: food and video cassette recorders. He had a house full to the ceiling with thousands of video cassettes. Everyone knew to bring him a video cassette recorder. He never used them. He couldn't use them. There was no electricity. But he collected them. And he was sitting, I'm kidding you not, he was sitting all evening gazing at this tower of video cassette recorders. I thought in a way it was romantic. It was like aspiration to technology, aspiration to the West. These were like emblems of what could be in a better future or something. I found it a bit idealistic. And, but General Momo was a cold-hearted, cruel dictator. And I collaborated with Shavkat Kamenovich until it was discovered that he was the head of the KGB for Africa. I was at the time involved with a competing organization, shall we say gently.
Okay.
And
he didn't know that you were
well,
working
of course
for
he knew.
else.
He targeted me.
Okay.
He came to my house in London. I had a house in London. Later sold to Tony Blair, by the way.
Wow.
You like such stories. So I had a house, 34 Connaught Square. 5 stories, 2 drivers. I was a kid. And so he came to my house. He targeted me, absolutely. We became great friends. We were traveling all over the world, Frankfurt, this, that. And he was milking me all the time.
Right.
I was a kid, absolute kid. I was 24. And then he took me to Sierra Leone. He said, we can make a fortune here. They will give us an island, and on this island we'll bury all the nuclear waste of Germany. And as a Jew, I thought it was an apt revenge. So he was a Jew as well. He was advisor to the Prime Minister of Israel.
Wow.
Which is one of the reasons and so on and so forth. And then it was found out that he was a spy. He was arrested on absolutely fabricated charges and smuggled by the Mossad outside London. And I did not dare to return to Israel because this world of intelligence is a very, very cruel world. There are no loyalties, nothing, no friendships. I mean, forget it. Since I associated, because I associated with the head of the KGB Africa, I mean, for 2 years, they would have assumed that he turned me.
That you'd flipped, yeah.
That I flipped me, flipped me, and that I have become a double agent or something. I mean, there's no mercy.
Yeah.
So
Israel was.
I stayed outside.
Yeah.
I stayed outside for several years, and I came back after negotiating a deal. I came back and then I established a brokerage house. It's a long story. Listen, it's a separate movie. Absolutely separate
Sam
movie.
Vaknin Part 2, the sequel.
Sam Vaknin Part 2, separate movie. Yeah. The sequel.
The sequel.
Sequel. Are you sick or well? I'm not the sick, and I'm not a well. I'm a sequel.
It's just the sequel.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I suppose we should wrap it there for the day, but it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Pleasure to see you.